What's up, everyone? Got something very special for you today. This is a review and demo of the ADA MP-2 rack mount guitar preamp. Some of you may be asking, what is ADA or who is ADA? They are a equipment manufacturer that started back in the late 70s, started out building guitar pedals. As the 80s unfolded, they started getting into more rack mount guitar gear, which was definitely the in vogue kind of fashion throughout the mid to late 80s and even early 90s. They're probably most famous for their MP-1 tube preamp, which was used by a ton of guitarists in the late 1980s and early 90s, including Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme, Paul Gilbert from Racer X and Mr. Big, Vito Bratta from White Lion. It was used exclusively on the first Skid Row album that included the songs such as 18 and Life and I Remember You and Youth Gone Wild, and was used extensively by the music producer Michael Wagner, who was one of the premier producers of the days that recorded a ton of those classic 80s hard rock and heavy metal albums. The MP2 picked up where the MP1 left off. It came out at kind of a weird time in the guitar universe in 1992 or early 1993. It was developed as a successor to the MP1, where they added some additional features to it and tried to broaden the appeal and broaden the sound of it a little bit, trying to get more of a little bit of that more modern for the time metal approach. This was right around the time that the Mesa Boogie dual rectifiers had first hit the market and that sort of thing. Timing probably could not have been worse, based on the fact that 1992 was about the time that we had the explosion of grunge and more stripped back rock music. With that being the case, a lot of guitar went back to being a Marshall or a Fender amplifier or a Mesa Boogie amplifier in the case of Soundgarden, with a guitar plugged directly into the front of it with a large guitar cabinet, a 412 cabinet or something like that, and maybe a couple of pedals on the front end. Very stripped back, kind of back to basics approach for the majority of mainstream music. Now, that's not to say that there weren't still some outliers there that hung in for a while with rack-mounted stuff. You can go back and you can see pictures searching the internet of John Petrucci using a Mesa Boogie's tri-axis rack mount preamp and a Stereo 290 stereo power amp, and several players in that genre. But slowly but surely, rack gear kind of faded from the popularity of the guitar world as it became more of a straight-ahead, back-to-basics type of approach. Now, if you're familiar and you're part of the current modern world of guitar, you probably know that obviously we've started seeing things such as rack mount type of gear and outboard preamps, modelers coming back into fashion. Kind of started in the early 2000s with the Line 6 Pod and the Pod XT, and went from there. Now today we have things such as the Axe FX, the Axe FX3. We have the Kemper Profiling Modeler amp and a number of other pieces of equipment that are kind of harkening back a little bit to that late 80s, early 90s heyday of rack-mounted gear, only with some more modern features. So that's a little bit of the background on it. Now let's talk a little bit about the MP2. We'll jump over to the screen of it here, and you'll see that it is a pretty straightforward single rack mount piece. There's my finger. Hi. It is set up, the MP2, some things that added the MP1 didn't have, is the MP1 did not have this output section, which has a separate level control and a room EQ that adjusts the sound for a simulated room sound. You also see across here a compressor threshold light, we'll get to that more in a minute, and a number of other lights that light up depending on what's being used, such as drive, master, tone, graphic EQ, chorus, effects return A, effects return B. You've then got the real basic digital display there, LCD display. That shows your preset number. It shows the name of the preset if it's something that's been labeled. You then have a four-way switch that allows you to adjust parameters. And moving the camera over here a little bit, then we have a number of individual buttons. These buttons can be used both to select presets, and if you go into the edit mode, you'll see there's a preset/user button there. There is a program edit button, and there is a system edit button. So we'll get more into those as we start going into this. So let me turn the camera back here towards the front where you can see the display. And what we'll do is we'll jump through some of the factory presets to begin with. And then from there, we will then go into the some of the presets that I've created myself. And we'll talk a little bit about how this guy works. We'll talk a little bit about some of the pluses and minuses, some things that I see that are great features of this and great things, and also some things that maybe aren't so great as well. For time period correctness, I'm using my 1990 Hamer Centauro, which is a what they would call a super strat back in the day. It has a humbucker, which I've got a DiMarzio humbucker in the bridge, and then 2 single coils, a Floyd Rose locking tremolo. I believe this one is an alder body, has a maple neck, and a rosewood fretboard, so pretty typical of the guitars of the day. So let's listen to a little bit of some of these presets that we have here, starting with, and I'm going to go back down through the foot switch, which I'll show that here in a little bit. Starting here with the very first preset, the Big Fat Crunch. We can hear, obviously, there's some chorus on that guy, and we can see the chorus light lit up. See some of the other presets. Let's see. Let's jump up on the next preset then. We've got a clean wah, and it does have an auto wah feature built into it as well. So we'll have a little... And you see it's kind of touch sensitive, like an auto wah filter pedal. The more you bear down on the strings, the more you hit it, the more you get that. So let's see, we'll jump ahead a little bit here. There's another partial wah preset. It's a clean chorus preset, so a very 80s kind of. There's a tremolo. It does have the ability to do tremolo in it as well. So there you go, you can get that kind of. Some more auto wah, more of a vintage. See what they consider a vintage sound. These are the factory presets. Now you'll notice there on the secondary camera that I do have my Behringer Tube Screamer clone, the TO-800, setting on top of the ADA MP-2, and we'll get into that more in a minute here, but that is not something that's currently running. It's just in line but not kicked on. Well, let's see what other interesting factory presets we have. They say this is an MP-1 preset. Not sure exactly which one, but... A little extreme there for you. I think MP1, I think Nuno Betancourt automatically, at least early extreme. Don't really love that sound though, honestly. Now I remember as a kid being completely and totally in love with the MP1, spending hours at my local music store. At that time it was Sounds Great Music in Southwest Missouri, sitting back in their isolation room with the glass doors pulled closed and just jamming away for hours on an MP1. But maybe the past brings some rose-colored glasses, because I don't love that sound if that's what an MP1 sounded like. I'd love to have one to compare it to, but I don't. So let's see what else we have for presets before we jump on. Okay, so there's it says large chorus. Let's listen to that. Very 80s there in that sound with that large chorus preset from the factory. So let's jump over from the preset to the user presets. Now on the user presets, you'll hear the clicking here where I am using the MXC MIDI expandable foot controller to control this with, and I'll show a picture of that, a still frame of that, because I don't have a third camera to put on it. It's basically a foot controller that attaches to the MP2 and did the same thing on the MP1 with a single 5-pin MIDI DIN cable, and then gives you the ability to go through the different banks of presets and also your 9 different presets within each bank as well. So it gives you a lot of flexibility as far as switching between sounds. Now this particular MXC that was gifted to me along with the MP2 from my awesome friend Brad Insminger. Brad, if you see this, you rock, dude. I'm still blown away with the fact you just gave me all this stuff, which is incredible. There are a couple buttons that stick on it. The number 5 button for the preset sticks on it, but that's okay. I just haven't taken the time to take it apart and work on cleaning it up. So anyway, let's check out some of the presets now on this. One thing you're gonna notice, I'm gonna kind of demo here, is you'll see that the pickups are kind of picking up my voice a little bit. That's because I believe the tubes are starting to get a little microphonic on this. They're probably the original tubes, and yes, it is a tube preamp. We'll talk more about that at the end when we talk about pluses and minuses. And I don't know, I haven't talked to Brad, but they may have never been replaced, which means this unit was built in '93, which means they're 27-year-old preamp tubes, so they probably are in need of replacement. So anyway, we'll start here with preset 100, which is one that Brad had left on here for me that says Beat to Death, which is a pretty heavy, grindy metal type of preset. So that is this guy. So pretty cool. Definitely not what I'd call a modern metal sound, although it can get close to that, and we'll talk more about that as we go through the presets, but a pretty cool 90s distorted metal sound. So let's jump up through some of these presets now. Next one is one that I've actually found through ADA Depot, which is an online site that actually caters to fans of this gear. You're going to notice there's quite a bit of noise here, which is one of the things we're going to talk about on the pluses and minuses, but and then this is kind of designed to be an emulation of like a Mesa Mark II. All right, so now the next one here you'll see on the screen on the B cam says Harvested S-Row. That was my little play on Metallica's Harvester of Sorrow, because this is a very scooped, very driven sounding preset. And we'll do it first off here as it sets, and then I'll also kick in the TO-800 to give it a little bit of a boost on the front end. But here's as it sits. Now with the boost, it kind of gives us that little extra bit of hair, which really improves the sound, I think. Somewhere between a Metallica sound and almost a Pantera type of sound. It's pretty close. See if I can play Cowboys from Hell without butchering it. It's been a long time since I've tried to play that. You'll notice that it's really silent there. That's because this guy does have a noise gate built into it as well, and we'll talk more about that on the features portion. So here is a clean chorusy sound, kind of like an 80s type of clean sound. All right, a little George Lynch docking stuff for you there. And I jumped ahead a little bit on presets. So let's see, preset number 5. This is kind of an interesting, kind of a gritty, somewhat clean sound. The TS clean means I'm putting the tube screamer on the front end of it. It gives it that very kind of gritty. Let's see what is next here in our list. 106 is listed as Hey Jimmy. So let me turn off the tube screamer, and you'll hear this is very much a... Let's see, 108 gives us an AC30 push, so kind of a voxy type of tone. is a preset I've created called 88 was great. So going for that very 80s type of guitar tone. Night Ranger, taking it way back to about 1982, 1983. Let's see. So now this is my take on kind of the later, very, very heavy George Lynch, kind of back from the Attack era of Dawkins sounding. And we heard a little bit of it earlier when we were jumping back and forth between it and that clean sound. We're going to put the boost on with it too, because this is a preset that's designed to have the boost on it. So. So So as you can probably tell by how much I geek out playing this, I really am enjoying this piece of gear and some of the sounds you can get out of it. So finally, very mid-range heavy. You'll see the presets listed as Tangled, Crunch, Plus. Kind of going for that second Lynch Mob album, Tangled in the Web. Very mid-range heavy, crunchy, but not super saturated distortion. It sounds like this. Alright, so now we have switched guitars to go back to something a little bit more modern guitar-wise. This is my Ibanez Art 300 that has active Ibanez pickups in it. They're not EMGs, but they're kind of an Ibanez version of an EMG. So we can kind of hear a little bit of what it does with a little bit more modern tone on it. So let me get back to the Modern Dirt preset, and let's check that out. Right now this is an open D tuning, but you'll still get kind of an idea. So you can get some good chuggy kind of tones out of this as well with the right high output pickup. So there you go, the ADA MP-2. Let's talk a little bit about now pluses and minuses, things I love about this thing, things I don't particularly like about it. On the pluses, it's very cool that it is a programmable MIDI switchable preamp, meaning that you can have theoretically 200 different sounds programmed into it and have them right at your toe tips? Right at your toes where you can switch between the various different ones. Also very cool that it is a tube preamp. It has two 12AX7 tubes inside that guy. I was going to take the cover off of it and show you a picture of the insides of it. At the end of this video, you may see that, you may not, but it is very cool that it's a tube/solid state hybrid. Flexibility within its range of what it can do. The fact that it's got tremolo built in, that it's got chorus built in, that it's got 10 different voicings for the preamp section, anything from a straight solid state clean to a very saturated tube preamp section. That's very cool as well. Some minuses to it. The biggie for me, it is incredibly, incredibly noisy. Let me turn this guy back on here. Right now, I have a gate on here. I'll turn off the tube screamer, and you'll notice it's not horribly loud, but that's because I have a gate on there. If we go over to the noise reduction, and we turn it off, there's the noise floor, and that is without the tube screamer on it. So, it's a very, very noisy beast, almost necessary to put in that noise gate, so this noise, that's obnoxious, goes to there, where you just about don't hear it. So, yeah, I wish it was a little quieter. There evidently are some mods you can do to quiet it up, but they potentially change the tone of it some too, so I may look into doing that eventually since I have this guy. And I'm fairly handy with a soldering iron, but we'll see. Other minuses to it. Well, one, it's old. This guy's almost 30 years old. It's 27 years old. So I'm sure as it continues to age, as electronics tend to do, some of the parts, the capacitors may start leaking internally, things like that, which may make it a little bit more flaky and a little bit less of a reliable piece of equipment. Would this be something I'd ever take out on stage with me? Probably not. This guy's gonna live in my rack and stay here in the home studio, and it'll be used probably pretty frequently, but just used in this environment where I control it, where it's not gonna get beat around moving it in and out of places. Now granted, you can make that argument that's true for any type of tube amplifier, but when something's 30 plus years old, even more so I think, or nearly 30 years old I should say, even more so. Finally, while it does have some pretty good flexibility within the range of what it can do, we've got to keep in mind that this was designed in the early 1990s. So, is it going to get that very, very modern metal periphery that type of sound, you can try, you can do a lot of manipulation, you can put pedals in the front end, it's got an effects loop you can run through the back of it, you could put a better noise gate on it, but ultimately, it's not going to really get that sound of that modern metal tone. Now that being said, does that matter? To me, not really, and honestly to a lot of you, probably not, because this guy's been out of production for, I believe, at least 25 years, so you probably don't have one of these laying around in your house, or maybe you do. Maybe that's why you're watching this video, is because you're like, hey, somebody's got one of those, I wonder what they do with it. But the odds of you going out and buying one of these, let's just say you're not going to go to your local Guitar Center, or you're not going to jump on Sweetwater's website and order an ADA MP2 today. It's just not going to happen. So, can it do ultra modern tones? No. Does that matter? In my mind, no, not really. Could you mod it to get it there? Possibly. I know there are a lot of mods for the MP1 where they do like ultra high gain mods and stuff like that, where they change a lot of the circuitry. You could possibly get that guy there, but my thought is, why? Enjoy it for what it is. Enjoy it for the fact that it was cutting edge, state-of-the-art freaking technology in the late 1980s, early 1990s, 30 years ago. And just have fun geeking out with it. Like I said, it very much has a use in my arsenal of tones. It's something that will stay in my rack and stay in my studio permanently, and will get used periodically here and there. Is it going to replace the Axe FX2 that I use on a routine basis, or any of the Neural DSP plugins? No, not at all. But is it something that when I want a specific flavor and a specific tone that I know I can get from it? 120%. Keep an eye out on this channel. Every Thursday, at least for the next 6 to 8 weeks or so, is going to be a vintage gear review where I'm going to pull out a cool piece of vintage guitar gear like this, and we're going to do a deep dive into it and see what it can and what it cannot do. Next week, we've got a very cool rack mount effects unit that I'm going to be pulling out from my stash that I was given by my friend Brad. And it can do some insanely cool sounds. Let's just say that somebody from a certain Irish rock band used this guy that I'm getting ready to show you next week. So tune in for that. Take care, everyone. Bye.